Welcome to the Sweepstakes College Baseball Podcast, where the Super Regionals has now been played. We are on to the College World Series with all 8 teams having really good results the past week, obviously making it to the next round. But first, we're going to go through our Super Regional predictions from the past week and see what we got right, what we got wrong. Both of us chose the exact same teams to make the College World Series, and we got 7 out of the 8 predictions correct. The only one wrong we had was Clemson beating Florida. It seemed like an obvious choice. Felt like, from my perspective at least, all these choices between teams felt relatively obvious. Maybe not NC State, Georgia, but for the other ones, it seemed like we were taking the favorites here, and a lot of other places maybe disagree with that. But from my perspective, it seemed like, especially for the one side of the bracket where the 1 seed lies, it seemed like all those were pretty easy picks because it was only one national team per matchup. The other side with Kentucky, Oregon State, and Georgia, NC State as the 2 teams that were both national seeds might be a little bit harder to decide, but we both got those picks correctly, and yeah, for the most part, seemed relatively smooth sailing for those picks.
Yeah, I agree that left side was just pretty easy for these super regional matchups. I think there was just a lot of chaos in the regionals this year, for the most part. No 2 seeds won a regional, so we saw a couple of those 3 seeds and a 4 seed come through, and that's exciting and all for regionals, but it doesn't make for great super regional matchups really. When you have those 1s versus 3s, it's pretty lopsided, and that's what we saw, especially on the left side of the bracket there. Like you said, couple good ones on the right: NC State, Georgia, Kentucky, Oregon State. Both of those, yeah, can't blame you for going either way on those. But I still liked the side we chose on both of those, and yeah, good week for us overall with those predictions.
Yeah, definitely boosting the overall records there going into the College World Series. It's interesting there were only 2 Game 3s that were played in Super Regionals, so even though there might have been a lot of close games, the series overall did end pretty swiftly. But now, heading to our Omaha, or 8 for Omaha preseason predictions, we have, we put these together before the season started, seeing if we could get any wild, outlandish predictions to come true. And some bold predictions did not end up going in our direction, but for the most part, teams that we expected to do well looked like most of the season they were performing relatively well, but obviously it's always tough to figure out the exact 8 teams that are going to end up making a run late. And starting things off, we chose 5 of the same teams to make it to Omaha: Wake Forest, Arkansas, Oregon State, TCU, and Florida were the 5 that both of us chose. And the only team that made it was probably one of the least likely there. Obviously, TCU also had a pretty rough overall regular season, but Florida, a team that many believe, including myself, that shouldn't have even made the tournament, made it, and now making that classic SEC run where an underachieving team finally starts to figure it out late in the season. And Florida's that team right now. But yeah, then out of the 3 teams that we didn't agree on, I chose LSU, UCLA, Duke. That did not pan out in any way whatsoever. LSU, also a team that did very much underachieve, turned up a little bit in the postseason, but did not make it this far. And Kevin over there getting Tennessee and NC State correctly. The only team that we disagreed on to make the 8 for Omaha that didn't make it for you was East Carolina. But that Tennessee and NC State pick looking really nice right now, as both those teams are set up to make potentially another deep run and hopefully make those finals.
Yeah, the Pac-9 there, NC State's looking for revenge for 2021, the COVID year. That's why I've kind of stuck with them the whole year. Want them to get that revenge. Felt like it was a year that was possible, and they've really stuck with it. And yeah, 3 for 8 on the predictions, not too bad. Getting four out of 8 for 500 would have been nice, but it's really tough to nail those preseason predictions. Every year, there's a couple top teams in the preseason rankings that don't pan out, and then even beyond that, you have to win a regional, have to win a super regional. It's a tough ask for teams to be playing well throughout the postseason as well, and so it's difficult, harder than it seems.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that you have Wake Forest and East Carolina Obviously, they were in the same regional. It would have been a real shock if neither of them made it out, and that is exactly what happened. So tough one there to not get potentially another team into Omaha, even though they would have been matched up with Tennessee, so it would have been automatically one side getting canceled out. But still, before the season, those teams looked definitely solid enough to make a run. But after this 8 for Omaha, after our predictions from there, we have our preview for the College World Series. We'll start off with the left side of the bracket with number 1 overall Tennessee. They went 2-1 versus Evansville. First 2 games, I think, were relatively close. Tennessee was able to pull away late in game 1, but Evansville, I think, was really surprising. Even though they were a 4 seed, didn't really look like it. I feel like every year, the past few years, there have been 4 seeds that make pretty deep runs. Evansville maybe didn't look like that team that could. They had their moments in the East Carolina regional, but going up against Tennessee, that's a huge ask to make it past them, and they put up a really good fight. Obviously, Game 3 was a blowout there for Tennessee, able to clinch it with just undenying amount of talent, just kind of overwhelming that Evansville team. But really impressed with how Evansville was able to at least keep it close with Tennessee for the most part.
Yeah, super impressive. Saw a fun little stat after they picked up that win. They're the first 4 seed ever to win a game against the number 1 overall seed, which is very impressive. You'd think one of those years that a 4 seed would be able to just, pick up a win at some point against that 1 seed, whether it's the first matchup or maybe in a loser's bracket matchup later in the regional. But super impressive for them to be able to pull that off, and great season for a team like that doesn't really have Omaha aspirations going into the year, but they were right there, 1 win away.
Yeah, for sure. And Tennessee will be matched up with number 8 overall seed Florida State for that first game. They went 2-0 versus UConn. The first game was just an absolute obliteration. Florida State looked dominant that game, but got to give props to UConn for showing up for that second game. They flushed the memories of game 1 and had a super, super tight matchup. Obviously went into the 12th inning there, but for some reason decided to continue to pitch to James Tibbs, and he showed up once again for Florida State in that second game with his 3rd home run of the game to take the lead and eventually win it in extras. So maybe the decision making wasn't the best there, but they really gave it their all in UConn. Florida State did enough that second game to win it, but they looked really solid overall offensively, at least, just putting up a lot of runs in that super regional.
Yeah, I think Florida State has looked extremely impressive throughout this entire postseason. Played well throughout the ACC tourney as well. Made the finals there before losing to Duke, so they've just been on a very good stretch here down the end of the season, and I really like how they're looking headed into this one. I know they have to go up against the juggernaut Tennessee, but, Florida State has Jamie Arnold, one of the best pitchers in the country as well. He's not going to win Pitcher of the Year, but he is one of the best aces in the country, and he's someone that could shut down Tennessee if he's having a good game, and so I think that's very possible. Wouldn't be surprised to see Florida State take that first game. Tennessee probably does, but it wouldn't shock me at all if Florida State's able to pull it off.
Yeah, it's a super compelling matchup. Both those teams are extremely hot. At this point, obviously every team is super hot, but Tennessee and Florida State, both teams probably are somewhat annoyed that that's the opponent that they drew. North Carolina and Virginia, the other 2 teams in their side of the bracket, may be seen as easier teams to take down. Obviously, North Carolina has been really, really playing well, but I think looking at Tennessee and Florida State probably just playing a little bit better, but now headed to number 4 overall North Carolina. They went 2-0 versus West Virginia, but that doesn't really show how tight these games really were. One of them ended in a walk-off hit by Honeycutt, and then the home run, and then the next pitch that he saw, the next game, first pitch, also another home run. So back-to-back pitches, super impressive. Honeycutt really was the differentiator in this super regional. North Carolina just edged West Virginia, but really, a lot of these, it feels like there should have been a game three. Really wish there were, but North Carolina just able to get things done in 2 games, and this was probably the tightest regional or super regional, even though it did only go 2 games, but just super competitive between those 2 teams.
Yeah, North Carolina has gotten it done throughout this postseason, but it's been a lot of close games. Hasn't been dominant at all. They had to go to that final game of the regional against LSU, and then like you said, they went 2-0 here, but both those games were very tight. But Vance Honeycutt has ice in his veins. I picked this team as my most overrated team going into the year because Honeycutt didn't have that great of a sophomore season. Wasn't too sure about all the pieces they were bringing into this team, but they have been very good throughout the entire year and continuing to find a way to win in the postseason. So we'll see if that's able to continue in Omaha.
Yep, and North Carolina will be matched up with number 12 overall seed Virginia for that ACC matchup in the first game. Virginia went 2-0 versus Kansas State, and even though the final scores had a little bit of gap between those games, doesn't really show how close those super games really were. Virginia was just able to kind of put things together late and add on some runs to separate themselves from Kansas State, but super competitive matchup. I don't know. I think Virginia, a team that throughout the year we have said has kind of been overrated, a team that just somehow figures out a way to win, even though maybe we don't think they're one of the top 8 teams in the nation. They're here now, and they just continue to prove that they deserve to be in a spot like this. And it seems like every year recently, Virginia has just made super deep runs in the postseason. So you just have to keep considering that as a team that has a lot of experience in the postseason and going up against an ACC foe that they have a lot of information on. It will be a super interesting matchup for that first game.
Yeah, Virginia, a team that we've kind of doubted throughout the year. They continued to win, but we weren't necessarily super impressed throughout the season. Didn't really think they had the it factor maybe, but like you said, Virginia's just a team that continues to find their way to Omaha. There's a couple teams that have been on a run like that, Florida, Texas, a team like Florida State up until the last couple of years as well. So teams that just continue to find their way to Omaha, and there's a lot to be said for that as far as the experience, both on the player side and the coaching staff, just having a comfortableness in those situations. I probably lean North Carolina in this matchup. I kind of like the revenge slate since they lost the conference series during the regular season. And I do think North Carolina just has more star power on that team, but Virginia's a well-rounded club at this point and certainly capable of doing some damage in Omaha.
Yep, definitely. And now for predicting our finalist out of this side of the bracket. From my side, it's a super easy pick as the team that I previously picked to win the national championship, Tennessee, number 1 overall seed. Overall seed is, it's hard to look past, obviously. It's now winner go home pretty much. It's a tough one, but Tennessee has shown that they can win when their backs are up against the wall. Obviously, it was against Evansville most recently, but they really showed out that final game there. Offense was just on fire, and if they can continue that, the team is super solid. No real gaps. Well, maybe some of these other teams have shown that, but yeah, just got to take Tennessee from this side of the bracket.
Yeah, I think this one's extremely difficult because I could see Florida State or North Carolina coming out of this, but I just feel like Tennessee's a little more well-rounded, and also just the lineup is a little bit deeper. Omaha's a tough ballpark to get the ball out of. Last year we did see quite a bit of home runs, but that was the first season in a while that it's really been an X factor there. A lot of times it's defense and low-scoring games, but Tennessee has one of those lineups where everyone on that lineup can put the ball out, even in Omaha, and so I think there could be a factor there, and I'll stick with Tennessee as well. Don't like going for the number 1 team in the country, but you just have to give it to them. They are very well-rounded, and they're playing well.
Yeah, they have that curse still, so we'll see if it's broken this year. Number 1 overall seeds do not tend to, fare well in any sort of postseason scenario, but Tennessee might be that team to break that curse. They had their their spells of trouble recently a few years ago when they had the by far best team in the nation and were not able to get out of supers. So maybe this team that's a little bit more under the radar, still as the number one overall seed, but definitely not that seen as the villains as much as they were a few years back. But yeah, Tennessee, a team that you really can't look past at this point. But now going to the other side of the bracket for the College World Series, we have number 2 overall seed Kentucky making it out of their super regional, beating Oregon State, who was the number 15 overall seed, beat them in 2 games. Just really impressive overall for Kentucky. Won in 2 different ways. First game was just an absolute domination. Really got out well, and then put up a huge inning later in the game, putting up 7 runs to really solidify that game. 10 runs, not giving up anything there. So just crushing this Oregon State team where it seemed like they had very similar profiles overall. And then that second game, winning a super close one. Overall, pitching only gave up 3 hits over the 2 games. So shut down completely that Oregon State offense, and Kentucky was just able to get enough that second game to take it in 2. So definitely one of the hotter teams. Played a good team, unlike maybe the other side where we saw just teams maybe get lucky with their matchups. Obviously, the teams that they faced made it out of regionals, but facing a national seed is definitely a step up from what we saw in the other side of the bracket. But Kentucky, super impressive overall. Definitely could make a deep run here as their first College World Series.
Yeah, I mean, super impressive. We've said it throughout the year, and I think it's continued through the postseason here that Kentucky's just one of those teams that kind of has that it factor. They play with a lot of energy. Put the pressure on opponents with their play style. Force teams to make mistakes. They're always laying down the bunt and stuff. You don't see that from SEC teams. Really pushing the button when they're running the bases as well. Forcing teams to throw the ball around, and you got to be on point and playing clean baseball to beat them. And we saw that even in that game, the second game against Oregon State, that go-ahead run is on a pass ball. The runner scores from second, so they're just always looking for that extra base, looking for the extra opportunity, and I think it's super impressive, and I think it'll continue here in Omaha as well.
Yep, for sure. And they'll be matched up with number 10 overall seed NC State after they went 2-1 at the number 7 overall seed Georgia Super Regional. Only one of 2 teams to win on the road, so you have to definitely take that into consideration here. NC State played super well, especially that first game, put up 17 or winning by 17 runs, but then right after that losing by 9. So the first 2 games just not competitive at all, but it set up a really amazing game 3, one of the few that we saw. The only competitive game 3 because Evansville and Tennessee was not close at all. So at least we got that as the only game that happened on Monday. It lived up to the hype. NC State more than doubled the hits of Georgia, but the game was still super close. Georgia was able to get some big bats and put up runs that way. NC State did that as well, but eventually NC State won by 3, and super impressive result. Overall, NC State, as a team that has taken down pretty much every good team they've faced, it's definitely a good thing to keep that momentum going, but facing a super tough Kentucky team in that first matchup.
Yeah, this is another team that, once again, for me, throughout the year has just kind of had that it factor. We saw it a lot throughout the regular season when they were winning those big conference series. They didn't always have the overall record, but when it was push come to shove and they were playing a top team, they played well and they handled those series and won the series. And we've seen them continue to do that in the postseason, play up to the competition, play up to the hype. And I think they'll continue to do it in Omaha as well. We'll say it for a lot of teams in Omaha. At this point, if you've made it this far, you have some form of a it factor, but I do think NC State just has a little extra there. And you have some guys left over from that team that got screwed over in 2021. I think there's a little fire under their belt, and they're looking to get back to where they should have been that year.
Yep, for sure. And now the other matchup, we have number 3 overall seed Texas A&M, who went 2-0 versus Oregon in the Super Regional. The offense was super impressive, just relentless over the 2 games. They put up 25 runs. I was at this super regional. The atmosphere was electric. It's really unfortunate that they lost Braden Montgomery. We'll see if that is a bad thing. I mean, obviously you're losing one of your best players, but who knows? Maybe you get that additional boost of just something to fight for. And obviously this team has a lot of talented players. They filled the gaps very, very well, even though they lost their best, maybe their best, second best player, something like that on the team. But still pretty concerned about their pitching. Didn't look the best overall and hasn't for a while now. And it looks like there might just be more injuries stacking up. So need to figure that out. Would definitely be beneficial for them to stay on the winner side of things. If they go the losers route, I really don't see them making a deep run here. So super important to get that first win.
Yeah, definitely a bummer to lose Montgomery. Like you said, that can spark some things, get the team, playing for him a bit. But it's really a tough loss. You never want to lose one of the best players in the country, projected to be a top 10 pick this summer when the draft does come around. But yeah, very complete team on the offensive side of things. We've seen the pitching staff click. They were, clicking through the middle of the season, looking really well. Looked like a team that, they were the number one team in the country for a bit there. But the pitching has kind of slid back off more to where we thought they were throughout the beginning of the year in preseason. So it's going to be tough. Like you said, probably have to stay in that winner's bracket. But with that offense, they're never out of the game. So we'll see.
Yep, definitely. And they are facing SEC foes, unseeded Florida. It's somewhat like a fake unseeded team considering how much talent they have, and preseason projections had them one of the top teams in the nation. But they went to Clemson and won that series 2-0. So we're finally seeing this team perform like their preseason expectations and really just got the job done when it mattered the most. Clemson just continues to get unlucky with the teams they get matched up with in the postseason. But right now, Florida, just a team that really don't want to be facing. Feel like that Clemson matchup probably should have gone Game 3. It's really unfortunate we didn't get to see that as well with how close that series was, especially that second game. Clemson went up in extras and just Florida was able to fight back and win that game in astonishing fashion. Just didn't let up at any moment. This Florida team somehow found a groove while they were barely above 500 and just continue to ride that momentum. Now that previous record doesn't matter, and yeah, now they're in the College World Series trying to make that similar run to what we saw Ole Miss do with one of the last teams in the tournament to make it to Omaha and then win the whole thing. This Florida team can definitely do it here. And matched up against Texas A&M, I feel like this will be a very offensive first game in the College World Series.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wanted to see Florida get here, but here they are. And, impressive fashion to do it against Clemson, a team that is another one of those teams that kind of had that it factor. Clemson was just very good at winning those messy games, those high-scoring games, and I thought that's what we were in for Game 2. We saw them take the lead there late in the game. We saw Cam Cannarella make one of the best catches I've seen in my life for sure. That was incredible, but Florida survives it, able to make it out, and they have the talent to be in Omaha, have the talent to win this whole thing. They made it to the finals last year. Not quite as talented, but certainly still capable. We'll see if they're able to go on a run here. I don't think they're going to make it out of this bracket. I think there is 3 really tough teams on this side, but they're certainly capable.
Yeah, they have the it factor with Jack Caglione, though, so we'll see if he's able to bring the heat and do some astonishing stuff pitching and hitting-wise. But now we'll do our prediction for this side of the bracket. I predicted them to make it to the final before the postseason started, and I'm going to stick with it here, and that is NC State. Like you mentioned, I just feel like they have the it factor. They know how to beat teams that are really good. I think all these teams do now, at least, but NC State's been doing it the entire season in the ACC. Now they'll be matched up against some more SEC teams, but they already took down Georgia. I think that will, if they didn't have enough confidence going into this, that'll definitely build that up even more, as Georgia was one of the hotter SEC teams at the end of the season. And I think they have a very good chance of making it to the finals.
Yeah, I got to stick with my preseason pick to win it all, obviously. Sticking with this NC State team, I still think there's something lingering from that 2021 season, and I'm really banking on that continuing throughout the end of this year in Omaha. I think they have the talent and just that it factor as well, so hoping they make me look like a genius.
Yeah, that is definitely on the cards. We'll see if they can make that run and make us both look smart here, but definitely you have a lot more riding on it. But now going into our prediction for who's going to win the College World Series as a whole, both of us have Tennessee and NC State in the final. I'm going to stick with Tennessee as the team I chose before the postseason got started. Number one overall seed, can't really look past it. But, I mean, any of these teams are there and have a chance to win it. I feel like this year especially, there isn't a huge drop-off of the caliber of teams. I feel like some years there are teams where you're like, they made it to Omaha. That was kind of their peak. But I can see any of these teams making a super deep run and winning the College World Series. But got to stick with Tennessee as the team that I chose before the regionals got started.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that every team here is capable. Sometimes we see a mid-major sneak in here. Usually a couple good Pac-12 or Big 12 teams as well. Maybe a Big 10 team here and there. But this is the first year since it's been expanded to 8 teams that has been 2 conferences, and it was by far the 2 best conferences throughout the entire season. And I'm sticking with NC State, the team that dominated the ACC throughout those series. May not have won the conference with the conference record, but they won the most important series, and that's what was impressive to me. And I think they'll be able to continue to do that throughout the bracket and then against Tennessee in the final.
Yeah, like you mentioned, the by far 2 best conferences, and because of that, we see these teams that have faced really good competition pretty much the entire year, and so they were just built for these kind of moments. They've faced really tough teams, been able to win them, and even if they haven't won them, they've got valuable learning experience from facing really tough competition week in, week out, and now we're seeing that pay off for all these teams here. But that'll be that for our College World Series preview. Be sure to keep an eye out later. Once the finals is set, we'll run through and do another podcast on that, do our predictions with the teams that are set. Hopefully it's Tennessee and NC State, and then we look really good. But besides that, be sure to keep an eye out, and see you next time. Peace.